Fellas, I never thought I'd say this, but I think the next big division in the UFC could be the flyweight division. I think in the next couple of years, with the amount of up-and-coming guys that we've got in the flyweight division, if the UFC play their cards correctly, this could be one of the best divisions in the UFC. Now, ever since Demetrius Johnson essentially left the UFC, the flyweight division's been a bit all over the place. Even when Demetrius Johnson was the champion, he was so dominant that there was no intriguing contenders for him to face, and the division's always kind of been seen as a bit dull. We had Figueiredo and Moreno going at it on 4 different occasions for the belt, essentially between 2020 and 2023. That was just the state of the title picture. Not really much movement at the top of the flyweight division, and no interesting contenders, to the point where those two just had to keep going at it over and over again. And then Pantoja becomes a champion, and I like Pantoja. He's a dominant champion, he's a fun fighter, but there's no one interesting for him to fight. It's just been the same guys at the top for the longest time, the same 3 guys, with Royval Moreno and Kai Kara-France gatekeeping the top of the division for the longest time, letting nobody else come into the division. Brandon Royval, he's lost to Pantoja twice, and he's 1-1 with Moreno. Moreno's lost to Pantoja 3 different times. I know the third one was quite close, but he's still 0-3 against him, and he's 1-1 with Royval, lost to him last year. And Kai Kara-France, who's supposedly next for the belt, this guy's lost to Pantoja in the Ultimate Fighter, and he got finished by Moreno and Brandon Royval, so he's 0-3 against the guys above him. And then the supposed next generation of flyweights, Tatsuro Ataru, who was supposed to be the next guy to take on Pantoja, fails at the final hurdle, loses to Brandon Royval in a close fight, and now he's going to have to work himself back up. Muhammad Mokaev, this undefeated flyweight guy who's actually got a good resume, gets cut from the UFC because of what he's doing backstage and the fact that the UFC didn't really like his style and him as a person. He's been now sent to Uber Eats. And then he's got Amir Albazi, who ended up getting completely pieced up by Brandon Moreno in what probably would have been a #1 contender fight, or at least a title fight eliminator, had Amir Albazi won that fight. But I don't think there was much hype around Amir Albazi anyway because of his performance against Kai Kara-France, so even the next generation couldn't make it through. And they've had to resort to bringing Kai Asakura over from Ryzen, which I actually thought was a good decision from the UFC, because we got a new prospect, a new guy at the top of the flyweight division to take on Pantoja. Obviously ended up getting submitted, but at least now we get to see hopefully Kai Asakura face the top 10 of this division, like a Kai Asakura versus a Kara-France or a Moreno or a Royval, just whoever he tends to face. I think it'd be interesting to see him against some of the top 10, so I think they did a good job with that. And even up-and-coming guys like Ramazan Temirov that the UFC brought over. Ramazan Temirov was on this huge winning streak, this flyweight prospects outside of the UFC. The UFC signed him to the UFC against CJ Vieira, brutally finishes CJ Vieira, then he gets signed to fight Charles Johnson, beats Charles Johnson comfortably too, and now he's managed to make a name for himself in the flyweight division, or at least he's about to, and he's somebody to look out for too. On top of that, Joshua Van, one of the most hyped up flyweight prospects right now. This guy's 23 years old. I think he was 21 years old when the UFC signed him. One of the youngest fighters on the roster. He was a champion in a different organization. The UFC found him, scouted the talent, found Joshua Van, brought him over to the UFC, and so far he's 6-1 in the UFC. He's only ranked number 15th, I think. 6-1 in the organization. His only losses to Charles Johnson, and most people would conclude that Joshua Van might be the best boxer, or one of the best boxers, not only now, but in flyweight history. His combinations, his rips to the body are amazing. His takedown defense is going to help him as he climbs up the rankings and faces those grapplers, and Joshua Van's definitely one of the most hyped up and promising guys we've got right now in the flyweight division, and the UFC did a great job at bringing him over to the UFC, and if he can build himself up, another massive prospect there for the flyweight division. You've also got Lonnie Kavanaugh, who just fought last night. Lonnie Kavanaugh is 9-0, undefeated, was a name in Cage Warriors, came from the Contender Series, got a good knockout on the Contender Series, and he's 2-0 in the UFC so far with 2 wins, and they've both been in good fashion. He's looked absolutely rapid on the feet. He's got pop in his hands, actually hits kind of hard for a flyweight. He's had two really fun fights in the UFC, can grapple, can strike. Another massive prospect for the flyweight division in Lonnie Kavanaugh, who I want to see face a top 15 opponent eventually, and I think he could potentially be the future of this division too. On top of that, you've got Andre Lima, who's 11-0, undefeated, came from the Contender Series, got a good win on the Contender Series, and so far is 4-0 in the UFC with 2 finishes. Technically, one of them was a DQ, but one good finish, especially in his last fight against Daniel Perez, where he looked amazing. He looked phenomenal with the striking. His striking looked on point. He absolutely battered Daniel Perez, and then ended up getting the cherry on top with a submission. And if Andre Lima looks like he did in his last performance in every title fight, or every flyweight fight that he has, another massive prospect for the flyweight division, somebody to look out for, new blood. And then we've also got guys like Dong Hoon Choi, who's 9-0 undefeated, Young Sung Park, who's 9-0 undefeated, Ronaldo Rodriguez, who is a huge star in Mexico, 17-2, undefeated in the UFC, and Rafael Estevam, who's 13-0. There's so many young up-and-coming guys in the flyweight division that it's actually kind of turning himself into a fun division. The UFC have also signed Horiguchi, who used to be in the UFC, but since leaving the UFC kind of made a run, 34-5. But yeah, if the UFC can re-sign Mokaev and build up Tatsuro Taira, I think the flyweight division's fixed. The flyweight division always had a problem of not having any contenders. There's nobody for Pantoja to face. They had to give him Steve Erceg rank number 8. They had to bring over Kaya Sakura. But with these amount of young, hungry guys, and the guys from different organizations that the UFC are bringing in, like potentially Makaev and, like I said before, Horiguchi, this could be an amazing division. And I feel like if all goes to plan, flyweight might actually be one of the best divisions because of the new talent, because of the new guys for Pantoja and everybody in the top 10 to face. And it's looking like in the next couple of years, this division has potential to be one of the best because flyweights always are having fun fights. It's very rare that you see a boring flyweight fight. They're always high-paced, a lot of strikers, a lot of fun, scrappy grapplers too. And that's what I like about the flyweight division. And even the welterweight division has kind of become fun in my opinion. You've got Bilal Muhammad, one of the most dominant champions right now. Huge unbeaten streak, dominated everybody. He's the champion of the division. You've got Shavkat Rakhmonov, 19-0, undefeated with 18 finishes. Fair enough, he might have had a bit of a flat performance against Ian Gary, but regardless, still one of the most dangerous fighters at welterweight and one of the most intriguing contenders. You've got Jack Della Maddalena, one of the best boxers in the UFC, very well rounded, undefeated in the UFC on this huge winning streak. He's going to be fighting for a belt soon, another interesting contender. You've got Sean Brady, who just dominated Leon Edwards in an even worse fashion than in the way that Bilal Muhammad dominated Leon too. Great submission artist, great wrestling, underrated boxing. His only losses to Bilal Muhammad, and apart from that, he's been completely going through people. Joaquin Buckley, since moving down to the 170 division, he's on a 6-fight winning streak, finished Colby Covington, finished and knocked out Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, has just looked amazing in all of his fights so far at 170, and it's a nightmare matchup for Bilal Muhammad too. And you've even got guys like Carlos Prates, Michael Morales, and MVP, who aren't at the contender stage yet, but are still massive prospects, and if they can build themselves up, they can be a legitimate contender right now in the welterweight division. So I think the welterweight division, with the new guys at the top, can also have potential to be a really interesting division too. I remember a few years ago when Usman was a champion, and we were seeing title fights like Usman versus Masvidal and Usman versus Kobe, and those two were the only guys at the top of the tree. Now we've got so much new blood, so much interesting contenders that we haven't really seen face each other at the top of the welterweight division. And I think the next couple of years for welterweight could be interesting too, but I think heavyweight is the division that needs fixing the most. They've fixed flyweight, they've fixed a couple other divisions, but I feel like this is the division that needs fixing the most. The recent fights that we've been seeing in the heavyweight division, you wouldn't think they're the top 15 best in the world when it comes to ranked heavyweights, and even worse outside the rankings. It's been complete slop. I don't need to tell you this, everyone knows this already. The heavyweight division is a complete mess. Mario Pinto and Talishan Teixeira are the only two real prospects, undefeated, both of them. But even these guys, even though they are the best prospects in the heavyweight division, it isn't even like it's like a Francis Ngannou type rise where they're going to be the next big thing, or Sergey Pavlovich. They look very beatable despite being the best prospects. Maybe they need to bring in somebody from like Olympic wrestling or like a high-level wrestler like a Gable Stevenson, or bring in a Glory kickboxing champion and maybe give them grappling, give them grappling training, feed them a striker in their UFC debut, or maybe just bring in a big name from a different MMA organization. Either way, the heavyweight division needs to be fixed. They need to find something to do. They found it with the flyweight division. In the last 12 months, there's so many more young flyweight prospects signed. Now they just need to do it to heavyweight. But yeah, that's what I think the next big division in the UFC is going to be. I think the flyweight division has potential to be massive. The heavyweight division needs fixed, and the welterweight division is looking impressive. But yeah, I think flyweight has potential to be the next big division in the UFC. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching.